Hey, what's going on YouTube and the Gospel Gambit Chess School community? My name's Kevin, aka Gospel Gambit, and I want to welcome you guys into part 2 of our series on the Leonhardt Gambit. Today we're going to be taking a dive into the accepted lines of this variation and the different responses that Black can play and how to deal with them. If you haven't done so already, please go back and watch the first video or the introduction video on this gambit. It kind of goes over different ideas that Black has in the Scandinavian defense, whether that's playing the queen back to d8 or an early knight to f6 instead of taking the pawn back on d5. We're not going to really be going over those moves at all in the second or third video, so please go back and watch those if you would like. First video also kind of explains the major overarching ideas that this gambit has to offer and what we are trying to accomplish by playing this opening. Without further ado, this gambit starts with e4, e5. Black dives into the Scandinavian after we play e takes d. Now Black takes back with their queen, and the only move here really is to play knight to c3, attacking Black's queen and asking them a few questions. Obviously, like I just said, they can play back to d8, which is about 30 to 33% of games, or queen to a5, which is another 30% of games in the Scandinavian. And when Black plays the move queen to a5, we play the Leonhardt Gambit, which is b4 right away. We attack Black's queen and ask them a few questions. Pretty much, do they want this pawn, giving us a half-open b file, or do they want to drop their queen back either to b6 or this check on e5? Those are really the three main options that Black has to play in this at this time. Today we're going to be going over the queen takes b4, and in the third video we'll go over queen to b6 and queen to e5 check. So keep an eye out for that third video. So Black takes on b4, and we are going to play the immediate rook to b1, supported by our knight. It develops a second major piece into our game. We are attacking Black's queen again, making them move this queen for a 1, 2, 3, a fourth time within the opening. And they pretty much have two major squares that they can play to: queen to a5 or queen to d6. According to the database, 66% of games go queen d6. The other 30% go queen to a5. And looking at my own database of games, on Lead Chess specifically, 4 out of my 6 games have gone queen to d6, and the other 2 have been queen to a5 by Black, as you can see here, right around the split that the overall population has. So first, let's look at queen to a5. Remember some of the major themes of this opening. This rook's been developed early on. It gives us access to the third rank, gives us access to the fifth rank, which is the move that we're going to play here. But the idea is that this rook can easily slide over into the attack on Black's king side. Once Black gets castled, we're going to be pretty much going all out and trying to tear open Black's defenses on the king side. And by having access to this queenside rook, it gives us an extra attacker that we can flood over to that side of the board and hopefully get a checkmate. Again, some of the major ideas of this opening: pawn to d4, knight to f3, bishop to d3. We'll go over that move in a little bit. Castling, with our bishop mainly staying on c1, I would say in most variations. It plays a heavy-duty supportive role, looking down this c1 to h6 diagonal. As usually, this knight from f3 wants to dive into g5, and our queen wants to have access along this diagonal itself, with getting to h5 and supporting our pieces that are all lining up against the h7 square. This is really our main target in this opening, and again, by having access to this rook, it allows us to slide over and easily attack Black's king, or even sacrifice more pieces because we're able to bring more pieces into the game quicker. So in this opening, Black has to play the move a6, otherwise he loses his queen. and we have this nice little discovered attack on black's queen. The computer recommends just bringing the rook back down to b3, and if you'd like, you can repeat moves here between you and black. The rook, like I said, mainly belongs on b3. Being on the 5th rank is nice, as it's supportive if black ever tries to play the move like e6 check with this queen. We can slide the rook over, so all of a sudden we have a centralized rook in the game. But mainly because we want this g5 square and the h5 square for our knight and our queen, sometimes it's not as easy to slide our rook over along the 5th rank as it is the 3rd rank, where a lot of times this knight has already jumped in, and in many games we don't have to play the move h3 because black's bishop is not coming out to the g4 square. They'll try to play bishop to g4. In a lot of cases, that's just a purely losing move because of the amount of pressure that we can put on black's light squares along their queen side. So in this position, you have a few different options. You can go knight to f3 or d4. And let's say the move d4, black can, they always have this option of playing, let's say, the queen to e6. If you want, you can slide the rook over or just defend with one of your bishops. I say centralizing the rook is a little bit easier to play, as it forces black's queen to move yet again. If they don't play queen to e6, they can play the move c6, trying to attack our rook and dislodge it. But now they're cutting off key escape squares from their queen. We can play the calm move knight to f3. This is a nice one to remember here if they play c6. We can play the calm move knight to f3 because, as you can see, in about 50% of games that go like this, black decides to take the rook on b5 and loses immediate to this nice fork that we have on black's king and their queen. So don't forget about that. If don't feel like you have to move the rook right away if black plays this move c6. And besides those moves, we can also see the move, let's say bishop to d7, hitting our rook. And in this case, we simply drop our rook back to b3. Why do we do this? Because after queen to a5, remember this queen is under attack by our light square bishop. Wouldn't be surprised if you guys win a few games with black just not seeing this attack on their queen by our light square bishop. And from here, you can play the move bishop to d2. All of a sudden, our threat on black's b7 square is alive and well again. We cannot take it right away because our knight would be hanging. So in this situation, if we end up taking the pawn right here, well, we drop our knight. So move like bishop to d2, and we might see a move like e6, and we can take this pawn right away. Alrighty, we could also play the move here, knight to f3. That's a totally playable move here. And again, queen to e6 in this position, we can simply just block with either rook to e5 or knight to e5. So don't be afraid of queen to e6. And again, the second most played move is c6, which we just looked at. Just play d4, continue your development. If black ever takes here, you have a nice fork on their king and queen. If they continue with, like, let's say f6, d4, and from here, black might try to play this move bishop to g4. It's the top move according to the database. Here is one of the only times we are going to play h3 in this course. And if black ends up taking, all of a sudden black's light squares are just collapsing over here on their queen side. A move like knight to c6 just gets met with d5, dislodging this knight. And a move like c6, again, just gets met with the move rook to b3. And all of a sudden, we are taking up all of black's pawns and playing fun games on the light squares versus black's king. So those are some of the ideas here out of the opening for queen to a5. Now black's main move is going to be queen to d6. And here we just kind of continue developing at a normal pace. We can simply just play the move knight to f3. We might see the move, let's say queen to f6, d4, giving a nice shelter for our light square bishop here. Black might play the move, let's say c6 here, dislodging any ideas of our knight jumping into the d5 or the b5 square. We simply continue by developing our bishop to d3. Playing this opening a few times now, close to 30 or 40 times. In many games I was playing bishop to c4, playing it very similarly to an Italian opening, right? Like e4, knight to f3, bishop c4, that kind of structure. But I found that in a lot of my games later on, I would be bringing my bishop back to d3 as, like I said earlier in the video, a lot of our pressure here is going to be aimed towards h6 instead of f6. Where the Italian, a lot of games are centered around this f7 square. Sorry, f7 and h7. The f7 square in the Italian, in this opening, the Leonhardt Gambit, a lot of our pressure is lined up along this pawn on h7 or even f7, h6 if black ends up pushing the pawn. Here black could easily play the move e6. I believe that's the topmost played move here by black. And if we see e6, well, let's just get castled and our development's mainly complete. What are some of the ideas now? Well, first of all, black's queenside is totally undeveloped. He's still 2 moves away from castling, and in many games they do get castled if they haven't blundered completely out of the opening. But as you can see, all of our pieces are mainly where we want them. This rook probably wants to be on e1, and this rook on b3, giving us access to this g3 and h3 square. But our bishop's pointed at h7. This bishop's pointed at h6, as well as supporting knight jumps in here to g5. Our queen has access to h5 if this knight ever gets traded off. And like I said, once our rook's on the 3rd rank, all of a sudden it's going to have quick access to the h7 square. Black might continue with bishop to e7, played in 70% of the games in this position. And in this position, you can play either queen to e1 or queen b3, rook e1 or rook b3 are totally fine. If you want, rook b3 plus half, or you could play rook to e1. And the idea behind rook e1 is that we can take advantage of the 4th rank now. So this knight, usually, like I would say in 90% of your games, jumps into e4 and is trying to get traded off with black's knight on f6, because the knight on f6 is protecting the pawn on h7. So by playing this move, once we play knight to e4, hitting black's queen and knight, they're forced to trade, and all of a sudden we have a rook playing along the 4th rank now, with our bishop's eyes to be open soon after it moves. So after rook to e1, black is mainly going to castle there, and we play the immediate knight to e4. We put our plan into action. The moment that we see black getting castled, we want to strike. And in this position, black pretty much has to take, and we take with our rook, and the game is on. Now, I don't believe I have any games in this specific position, but some simple, let's say, errors you might see by black. Well, if they try to just develop their bishop here, all of a sudden they're really limiting the amount of squares that their queen can travel to. So you might see them just trying to get their pieces untangled from the queen side, and all of a sudden black's queen has to play hot potato again. Not only did it move like 4 or 5 times in the opening, all of a sudden black's queen is moving again here and getting further away from his king. And if we see him move, let's say like knight to d7, trying to get a knight over to f6. Again, we have this bishop to f4 idea, hitting their queen and pulling them away from the action. From here also, I think it's a lot easier just to play the move, let's say rook to g4, and after knight to f6, drop our rook back all the way to g3 and be nice and cozy on the third rank here. We're going to try to get rid of this knight again and bring all of our pieces into the attack. If black, let's just plays a nothing burger move, well, we can centralize our knight and all of a sudden get more pieces into the attack. I have a few supplemental games kind of showing off some of these ideas, and I'm going to pull them up now for you guys. I'll put them in the guide as well. You'll have access to the lead chess study. So let me pull up the game here. So as you can see, I didn't play this perfectly. I've been learning as I go here, but it shows you some of the major ideas that we just talked about. Again, I played bishop to c4, and later on in the game, you're going to see me drop my bishop back to d3. So as you can see, we have a similar setup to what we just showed on the last screen, with our bishop being on c4 instead of d3. If our bishop was on d3 here, we would almost certainly have some Greek gift type of sacrifices going on against black's king right away. In the game here though, because black moved his knight, we can hit their queen, and at this moment we dropped our bishop back to put all of our attack on the h7 pawn. Black tries to get their second knight into the game, and after some deliberation, it was actually found that this knight should be going into the game. It opens up this bishop's eyes and does the exact same idea that I was trying to hope for in the game. Instead, we played bishop to g5, the other knight to g5, and after some trades, we were able to take here and quickly win the game with a resigner. Look at that, 3 to 4 pieces after this knight. So 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. We're able to get on the attack and a really quick amount of time there. This was a queen to d6 game. And let's see here. So I had 4 different responses here by all different types of people. So that was the 2000 player that I won with that game. In one of the 1900 games, let's look at that. Again, the tail of the tape here. You can see it's not the prettiest game, but it jumps up sharply once we get into the swing of things. So we dive into the opening. Again, c6, castle. In this game, we delayed d4 a little bit, as well as we put our bishop on the wrong square. It's mainly just because it's looking at this pawn, little pawn chain. It doesn't really have any ideas of being able to get at the f7 square. We do our same position again, very similar. Like I said, this bishop should be back here on d3 instead of c4. So hopefully just watching this guide allows you guys to skip over these sort of mistakes in your own games. Again, we rook lift our b rook up to the third rank. Also, I'm sure knight to e4 would have been a good move as well, as that's the top engine move. And black plays this move, pawn to b6. They're just trying to make space here for either their bishop to get in the game or play it all. And all these games we're kind of seeing black's queen side totally not playing in the game. Our queen side is ready to attack and strike, as it's all pointed at black's king, and our queen side is developed for the most part in a fairly good way. At this point, I ended up playing knight to e4. We took, and again dropped my bishop back. And we would have had a similar position to this with one less tempo if this bishop wasn't stuck on c4 instead of c3. And black tries to simply run away here, and won't show really too much of the rest of the game, but we're able to just tear black's king side up and get the rest of our pieces into the game. As you can see, I mean, we have 4 pieces again against black's king. His queen, knight, and rook are all out of bounds on the queen side. Even this bishop has eyes staring at some of black's pieces in the middle of the board as well as on their king side. Let's look at one last game here, and we'll do a scroll down. Again, another game where fairly even in the middle, and then it jumps up sharply. Again, this is a game where I missed. I was just totally, this was 300 points lower, so I was playing this gambit for some of the first times here. Black loves to play this move, g4. It's just a Scandinavian classic, bishop to g4. Trying to do the fishing hook or any of those sort of ideas, especially with the queen on b6. You know, we block, we attack it, he plays here, and all of a sudden we're getting checkmated on h2. Here, I should have just picked up the free pawn, gone back to material equality, and totally destroyed black's queen side here. We did not do that though, as we played h3, and in theory we should be playing the move g4 right here, but we don't. Finally, I see that the pawn's hanging on b7, and after knight to f6, we could have easily played the move knight to b5, threatening check on black's king, picking up a free rook, as well as threatening black's queen. So those are just a few games. I wasn't even playing perfectly or the right setup there. It took me a few games to kind of get into the flow of things, even learn where the pieces should be placed. Hopefully this guide allows you guys to jumpstart and skip over those errors that I've made in my own games, and to allow you to bring the pieces to the correct squares so that they're working in unison together to attack black's king, so you don't have to waste extra tempo by bringing, like, say, bishops back from c4 to d3, or having a rook on the wrong squares over here on the b file. So really b3 and b5 for this rook if it's not taking the pawn on b7, and usually this rook is supporting this knight jump into e4 and playing along the 4th rank. All these games, as well as the Lichess study guide, will be in the video description. For my school community, the Lichess guide will be in the classroom along with all these videos. Hopefully you guys learned something from this opening guide. It's a really fun gambit to play against the Queen A5 Scandinavian. It's probably my second favorite opening behind the Evans Gambit itself. Just don't always get the opportunity to play it because of the specific circumstances that need to occur. If you guys like this video, please like and subscribe it. If you haven't done so already, please join us on school.com. It's totally free to join us over there as a chess community of club level players, all looking to improve and try to get better. We have more of these opening guides, as well as chess tactics and study plans for you to have free of cost. And if you guys play your own games in this opening, please post them below. I'd love to see them. Love to see your guys' success, your failures, what's working for you and what's not. And without further ado, guys, have a good night.